Hello there and welcome to our webinar. My name is Brian Gorn and I'm the president of Motion Media LLC. Motion Media is an Autodesk reseller. We've been reselling Autodesk software for about 20 years and we are located in Santa Monica, California. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the current and future Autodesk subscription and upgrade policies. Hopefully go over some of the differences between the various subscription types, go over what the upgrade policies will mean to you in your current situation if you already have Autodesk licenses, and answer some questions I know that will come up during our webinar. So let's get started. Most of you on this webinar have received an email from Motion Media or Autodesk about the upgrade policy change. And that is, as of February 1st, 2015, you will no longer be able to purchase upgrades from your older versions of Autodesk software. So what that means is just that. However, what it does not mean, and what a lot of people are asking, is whether or not Autodesk is going completely cloud as of February 1st, or if they will be able to still purchase perpetual licenses. You still will be able to purchase perpetual licenses after February 1st, 2015. You just will not be able to upgrade your older licenses. This was announced about a month ago at the Autodesk Investors Day that perpetual licenses will be phased out over the next 1 to 2 years in favor of a subscription-only model. So as of February 1st, you will be able to still buy perpetual licenses, but as of 2016 or 2017, that may not be the case. I'm not really sure when exactly this is going to happen. I think it's going to be a phased-in approach, just like they announced, and you'll probably see some products be phased in sooner than others, although this is about all we know at this point. So let's take a look at, see how this Autodesk upgrade policy change might affect you. Over the next couple of slides, I've taken some common examples and we're going to go over what February 1st means to you in these various situations. In most of these situations, February 1st will not be your drop dead deadline to add subscription or to upgrade, and we're going to see why that is. Let's say you bought a current 2015 license and you never put that on maintenance subscription for whatever reason. You have up until the 2016 release date in order to add subscription and thereby being on the subscription plan and getting upgrades going forward. The rule is that you have 1 year or until the next release comes out in order to add subscription to your purchase. Once the 2016 release date comes out, Maya 2016 comes out, then, and you have not added maintenance subscription, well, then you would not have an upgrade path at all. So that is kind of your drop dead date, so to speak, to decide if you're going to stay with your 2015 license or you're going to want to be on the upgrade path. The other example here on this slide is you purchased a current 2015 license, or you have a 2015 license, I should say, on an expired subscription plan. This would mean you purchased an earlier version, you purchased subscription, but that subscription has expired. You're allowed 1 year to renew that subscription with a late fee. Typically that late fee is about $100, but you have 1 year after that expired date to renew. So regardless of February 1st, 2015 rolling around, you still will have that full 1 year to renew that expired subscription. So let's say you expired October 1st, 2014. You have until September 30th, 2015 in order to renew. That renewal does get backdated, so it just picks up from where it left off. You don't get a fresh year from that renewal point, from when you actually pay for that renewal, but you still will be in the upgrade path and you can still maintain your license accordingly. So on this slide, we have a small group of people that this applies to, and that is someone who purchased a version of, let's say, 2014 or even 2013, and their subscription expired prior to 2015 being released. Maybe it expired March 31st, 2014, and the 2015 release was a couple of weeks later. That person also has 1 year after expiration to renew. Once you renew, you would get that 2015 release, and your new expiry date would just be 1 year from that point. So you don't have to necessarily be on the Maya or Max version 2015 in order to qualify for the 1 year renewal. You have 1 year to renew regardless of where you're at. And once you renew, you get all the backup dates available to you, and you can move forward as if your expiration never happened. So now if you don't have a subscription, or your subscription expired more than 1 year ago, even if it was 1 year and 1 day ago, you have no upgrade path after February 1st. And that's what it's really all about. Anybody that has older licenses or an expired subscription plan for more than a year, they need to upgrade before February 1st, 2015, or that will not be an option for them. Now, one question that comes up a lot, or I want to make sure people are aware, is that your older perpetual licenses are still valid. They're just not eligible for upgrade. If you have a version 2012 that you're happy with, and maybe you're never going to use any version later than that ever, that's totally fine. You purchased that license, and it's a perpetual license, so you're fine. You just will no longer be able to upgrade it. So don't worry, you're not going to be out of license compliance just because you're not on subscription. There are other reasons you might be out of license compliance, but simply having an older version isn't one of them. So talking about that, there is one thing that comes up a lot, and I want to make sure people are aware of this. And part of having subscription, there's one benefit that people tend to forget about over a long term, and it has crept up in many times, in many cases, with Autodesk's license compliance team, and that is, if you no longer are on subscription and you had a network license, the chances are that network license had 3 versions of support built into it. So if you have Maya 2015 and a network license and are on subscription, that license also supports 2014, 2013, and 2012. And what happens when your subscription expires is you no longer have that benefit. And by running that network license file, you are out of license compliance, and the Autodesk license compliance team doesn't like that. So my recommendation would be, if you're not going to stay on subscription, although I recommend you do stay on subscription, but if you're not, that you get an updated license file accordingly with just the last version that you qualified for, and that will make sure that you're staying within license compliance and not using a benefit that you're not eligible for. But again, your full commercial perpetual licenses not on subscription are still valid. They're still licenses that you have, but you just don't get the benefits of subscription, which we're going to go over some of those here in a future slide. So the first thing I want to do is go over the 3 subscription types: desktop subscription, maintenance subscription, and the cloud services subscription. The 2 most common that we're familiar with in the media and entertainment world, which is the world that most of the people probably on this webinar are in, are desktop subscription and maintenance subscription. Desktop subscription is rather new, but it's essentially their renewable term usage, or you might want to call them just rentals. You basically, much like what Adobe does with the cloud, you can rent them on a monthly or an annually or a quarterly basis. There's no perpetual license required, and so forth. Now, maintenance subscriptions, what most people on this webinar would have. They've owned a perpetual license and they've added subscription to it. And this maintenance subscription is typically a lower cost annually than the desktop subscription. However, most of the benefits between those two are the same. There are some differences, and we're going to go over that here in a couple slides later. But for the most part, they're very similar and the same. Just one requires a perpetual license to purchase and one doesn't. Hence, one is more expensive than the other. The cloud services subscription, it's a pay-as-you-go format, or rental as you might want to call it. And some of the cloud services, most of them are included with your desktop and maintenance subscription. But however, there is a cloud services subscription that is a little bit separate. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because frankly, there's not a lot of cloud services specific to media and entertainment. There is one that stands out, however, and it's called Character Generator. And that's a cloud service that anybody on desktop or maintenance subscription has access to. It's a pretty cool quick character generator that you can create different male and female figures with different types of clothing and size and weight and all of this, and you can export that out for use in your software. I might go over that in a future webinar. It's pretty neat. I've played around with it. I'm sure everybody on subscription has at least looked at it, but outside of that, there's some storage and other tools. There are a lot of other tools like rendering and some other things available for the other verticals that Autodesk sells to. And I'd be happy to discuss that offline with anybody that might have building design suite or product design suite or something like that. There are some additional services available there, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of this webinar. I want to focus on the policies and upgrades and subscription more so than what specifics that cloud services comes with. So getting into desktop versus maintenance, this is a little chart that I've put together that kind of outlines what you get on this subscription. Now there are two types of subscription. There is standard and advanced, I guess you would call it. And I'm going to go over that as well. But right now, the differences between desktop and maintenance subscription. Most of the things you can see here are the same, but there are a couple differences. One, on the desktop subscription, which is the rental program, there is no floating or network license support. While on the maintenance subscription, that is for your perpetual licenses, you can use standalone or floating licenses. Now, a couple of questions have come up on this, and one of those is a very good question, and we don't know the answer to it, and that is, if you don't support floating network licenses on the desktop subscription, what do you do about Maya Batch, for example? Maya Batch, you get 5 batch licenses with each floating license. However, since there is no floating license on desktop, how do you do that? And right now, there is not a way to do that, and I'm not sure what the future holds for that. So right now, the only way really to run batch, I guess, and to do a render farm with desktop maintenance is to purchase this like amount of desktop maintenance subscriptions and put them on the various computers and use that to render out your Maya files. With maintenance right now, you do have that option. So that's a pretty big difference in the two at the moment. Both of them offer basic or advanced support options. There are some basic, both of them offer basic and advanced options for support. On the Ultimate Suites, advanced is included and it's optional for all of the rest. The home use rights and previous version rights are subtly different between the two, mostly because desktop subscription hasn't been out that long. It's only been out since the 2014 release, so the earliest version available is 2014, while on the maintenance subscription, much like we spoke about earlier on that license compliance slide, is that you do have 3 versions back that you can have access to as a maintenance subscription customer. Even if you're standalone, you can have 3 versions back. So if you own a Maya 2015 perpetual license with maintenance subscription, and a client walks in and has Maya 2013 files, most of those should open in 2015 and so forth, but let's say you do want to have Maya 2013 to be 100% sure that there's no issues there. You can get a serial number generated for that if you're on a standalone license, and if you're on a network license, it's already going to be included in the license file most likely. If it's not, we can certainly help you with that, and we can help you offline. The home use rights, basically on the maintenance subscription, you can install your software onto machines for the same person. It is product specific, but for Maya or 3D Studio Max or any of the entertainment suites, any of the main products, this is pretty much the case, that you can install the software at your office, let's say, and maybe at home so that you can take work back and forth and continue working. On the desktop subscription, it's a named user type of approach. So it's a one-to-one name user approach. So you can install and use at multiple locations because it's all based upon your username, which is typically your email in this case. So a little bit different because the perpetual license doesn't really work that way. Desktop might be a little more flexible for you in your home use rights. Your territory rights are also a little more flexible on the desktop subscription, but for most people, the maintenance and the desktop offer enough territory rights for them. Maybe some large studios or studios that have large teams that are going and working overseas, and let's say in the UK, might find this more interesting than the individual user. But with maintenance subscription, you can go, if you're in the US and you purchase in the US, you can use the software for up to 90 days per 1 year outside of the US, as an example. On desktop subscription, and if you purchase the desktop subscription in your home country, and let's say you're in the US, you can use that software anywhere in the world. There are a few exceptions. There are some countries listed on Autodesk sites that are excluded from this. I'm sure you can guess which countries those are, but I would say go to Autodesk site and you can look that up, or ask us and I will send you the link. But you can essentially use the software globally. There are more specifics about that in an upcoming slide. They both have the 25 gigs of cloud storage and cloud credits available if it applies to your product and so forth. Now, one question that does come up a lot as well is, if you are using that cloud storage, what happens if your subscription expires? You have 30 days to remove your data out of there after your expiration, otherwise you may lose it. Okay. Okay, so here are some common desktop subscriptions. Like I said, I'd go over a little more detail about the territory use rights and so forth. One, it does not run off the cloud. You do not run the software from the cloud. That is available through some of the cloud services that we discussed briefly, and I can go over that offline with anybody who wants to know more. But for some of the software, they do offer that. But generally, it's the desktop subscription. Your software, you're downloading it just like you do a perpetual. You install it just like you do a perpetual. It runs off your local machine, uses your local machine resources, your GPU, the amount of RAM, all of that right off your local machine. It is a named user account. It's a one-to-one named user account. You can install it on multiple machines. You can have multiple users on the same machine and so forth. I will say that there are some caveats to this. For example, if you're going to have multiple users use the same machine, when your administrator or whoever is managing that account, that desktop subscription account, assigns that, it can take up to 24 hours for that to go through Autodesk's system. So you need to be prepared. If you need to set that up and you expect it in 5 minutes, it's probably not going to happen. For contracts for more, and then with more than one seat, then there is an admin that kind of invites, manages users. They can change users. That admin has quite a bit of flexibility there. You can assign who gets what benefits and so forth with each license that you own, or not own, but rent, I guess, in this case. There are some limitations with the reassignment of named users as well. I don't know if this is going to change, but I think it's only once per term. That might be a limitation for some of you if you're looking at an annual contract. It might even be per year, even on the same contract. If you have a lot of contractors coming in and out and you want to reassign this license more than once in a year, we might have to get special approval for that or do some other workaround. And no guarantee that that's going to happen even, but just to know that you may be limited to once per term. Okay, let's talk about territory use rights. I went over it briefly in a previous slide, but there are some things to know about that. First of all, if you purchase the license in your home country, let's say you're a US citizen, you live here, and you purchase the desktop subscription in the US, you have global territory rights. You can use that license anywhere in the world, with the exception of the countries listed on Autodesk site. If, however, you're a US citizen and you live in the US and you travel to the UK and purchase a desktop subscription from the UK, your rights will be limited to the UK. And in addition, the named user on that license must also be in the UK. So you have to be careful about that. If you have a team of studio of 20 people and you're going to send 10 people over to the UK to work, no problem, you're within your rights. If you hire on 5 contractors over in the UK and you purchase 5 desktop subscriptions for them in the UK, that's totally fine. However, if you were to come back to the US, well, when you come back to the US, those extra 5 licenses cannot be reassigned to a US user. So you have to keep that in mind and plan accordingly. On maintenance subscription, you could certainly take your maintenance subscription and take your team over to the UK and work. You're just limited to a 90-day period. So if your production is going to go longer than 90 days, you just want to take that into consideration. You can co-terminate your licenses just like maintenance subscriptions. So if you have an annual desktop subscription and 6 months into it, you need to add a couple licenses, you can just add those for 6 months and co-terminate those to the same contract end date. Another common question, do you have to be on the internet? You do at least once every 14 days. After 7 days, it'll start prompting you to remind you to connect to the internet, but you can be offline as long as 14 days. You cannot transfer licenses, much like a perpetual license. They're not transferable. And as I mentioned earlier, there's no floating support with a desktop subscription. So we are nearing the end, and I want to take a moment to talk about the 2 levels of support available on either desktop or maintenance subscription. Most of this chart is self-explanatory, but I'm going to point out a few things. The first is the remote desktop assistance that is available only with the advanced support option. Now, the advanced support option is about $300 per year more than your standard basic subscription. However, I think when you see this chart, the $300 could be well worth it. And there are a couple things on here that a lot of people just don't know about. The remote desktop assistance I just mentioned, that's pretty obvious. They can get on your machine remotely and look and see what the problem is. The other one is the escalation option in support forums. If you're on one of the Autodesk support forums, you can request to take that problem offline and go one-on-one with the person you're working with on the Autodesk support forum. You cannot do that with a basic subscription or without subscription at all. So that is pretty cool. You know, that's a really good way to get any problems or troubles you're having resolved. You get all your priority support and 24/5 telephone support versus in the basic standard subscription, you do everything by logging web cases and doing web email. That can be very handy, but it's not quite the same, in my opinion, as being able to pick up the phone and call somebody. The difference, like I said, is about $300. A per case basis when you call into Autodesk, if you do not have subscription, the last time I checked was $150 to $250. So the $300 for a whole year, if you make more than a couple of calls, 2 or 3 calls, it's well worth it. At any rate, if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to contact us and I would go over any of these specifics with you. Also on Autodesk site, I believe there's an FAQ that has a little more detail about any of these things. And with that, I appreciate everybody coming and listening to this. I will be recording this and probably editing out a third of my ums and ands for you, but we'll see how much time I have. All right, well, thank you.